This is a picture of the Spring Valley Cheese Factory. This building, unfortunately, was torn down in 1996. It was very dilapidated at that time. We know that it was started around 1894 by Jesse Knowles and Newton Alderman. This picture depicts a small operation which was very typical of creameries in those days in Douglas County. The grasses are very rich in the area. That's why I think there was a lot of dairy operations. They raised a milking shorthorn. We think of a milking operation as Holsteins, but it was a milking shorthorn that produced a richer butter fat and also could withstand the winters. This is the top of what's classified today as the Palmer Divide. Every weather front that comes across Colorado comes right over Pikes Peak. The winds are primarily from the south there. The winters on the Palmer Divide were not a pretty picture. They were very difficult in those days. We're not quite sure when it ceased operation, but we know that there was a lease to the Higbee Mercantile Company in 1909, and it ran to 1913. We assume that sometime after 1913 it probably ceased operation. It's known as Tipperary, named after the Irish song, "It's a Long Way to Tipperary." Supposedly, this song was quite popular in those days for the people that came there to dance. Of course, it was a pioneer community that liked to get together and have dances.
I've heard the folks speak about going to Tipperary and dancing all night and having a wild big time out of it.
I guess there was quite a few stills in Spring Valley, so the legend goes. And they would take their liquor and they would hide it in West Cherry Creek, and then they'd all go to the dances and they'd pick up their bottles before they got there, if, of course, someone hadn't found them first. In 1920 and 1930, families that I have talked to in the area would take their milk to Larkspur, to the Carlson Frink, which is noted for its Black Canyon cheese.
Of course, I don't think you can even buy Black Canyon, but it was a French specialty.
The Black Canyon cheese was produced from cattle around this area. The grasses on the Palmer Divide are very rich, and the richness of the butter fat is what made this kind of a unique cheese. The earliest records show around 1866 that Spring Valley existed. There was certainly mountain men there before that time, probably as early as 1860. Spring Valley was most noted for being a stage stop off the Cherry Creek Trail.
Our earliest settler in this area was Joseph Geiger. He and George Ingalls, that was down at the Winkler Ranch, had a toll road.
And that was built by my great-uncle, Mr. Engel, who took a scraper and a team of horses and built a road up the side of that hill, because this was the main route for all of the freight wagons that were going into Auraria for the mining supplies.
As the crow flies, it's probably 24 miles, but the route they had to take was a good 30 miles.
This was a facilitating effort to give them a route to get up out of the valley floor and head over the mesas.
The tolls ranged from 25 cents for a rider and a horse to $1 for, say, a team of horses and a wagon.
There was a post at the bottom with a little tobacco can with the toll prices. It was on the honor system. It worked very well. And after about 3 or 4 years, my great-uncle felt that he had been reimbursed for his time and energy to build the road, so he took the toll down.
Early Spring Valley had a livery stable. It had the Geiger store.
John Geiger was my grandfather. Uncle Jake, that was Grandpa's brother, was the one that ran the store.
The stage stop was located on the southeast corner of Spring Valley and Lorain Road. Of course, there's nothing left of it right now, but that is where the Guile Ranch was. You can still see the fort. Indians were quite a problem in Spring Valley in those days.
The last Indian scare was in Douglas County in 1877 when the last people were scalped.
The schoolhouse is, I think, another very significant property. Number one, it's one of 2 structures still standing in Spring Valley. It was the 3rd school district in Douglas County, which means it's very old. It is exactly like it was 100 years ago. The barn is still there, the outhouse is still there, woodshed is still there.
We'd all meet over at Spring Valley School with the biggest banquet dinner you ever put on. Why, they had it there. And banquet, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and if you had no place to go else, again, why, you could come back for New Year's.
Everybody was so poor. Everybody. And yet we were so happy.
The original well is still out front. It's just like taking a step back in time and being able to see what it was like to have a little schoolhouse on the corner.
Pioneers first came to this country. They noticed the Indians left that knoll alone. And sometimes there would be an elderly Indian, and as the tribe went across, he disappeared. And he was left on that knoll. So the Indians didn't desecrate that ground. So the pioneers, as they came to Spring Valley, they had their dead in the wagon train and so forth, and they began to bury there. Our oldest graves in the cemetery are 1870.
The people that are buried there were the early pioneers of both northern El Paso County and Douglas County. I think they tell a very significant story about how life was before the turn of the century on the Palmer Divide, how difficult life was. You know, they had epidemics, they had farming accidents. We have one family that lost 7 children in 1 year that's buried there. But I think the headstones are very unique and interesting to look at because they always tell about a person. There's one man that I always get a kick out of that's buried there. His name was Pat Murphy. He was an Irishman. He lived to be 105 years old. He climbed Pikes Peak at 100, and he would walk everywhere he went.
Frank Brown told a story about his father driving to Colorado Springs with a team and wagon, and they found Pat, and he had a 15-dozen egg crate on his hip. And Mr. Brown said, "Pat, would you like a ride?" And Pat says, "No, thank you, I'm in a hurry." And he kept on walking, and he beat him home, too.
Railroads were coming through Larkspur and Greenland by 1885, and these toll roads and wagon roads weren't as necessary. Still activity there, but not near as much because the wagons weren't coming through anymore. However, our cheese factory was still in operation from 1894 through, say, 1915, 1916, or somewhere in there.